Nice to see so many of you out there. So, I would like to share this project with you today, but before we can get to our hopes and designs for a human city, we have to go via a more brutal and immediate reality. So I just want to show you this short film.
They came 7:30. They came with their bulldozers and they came with their soldiers.
Yeah, this way. Front, go front. Forward. Step side. That side, may go this side. Police on that side, you cannot come this side. Come this way. Come inside. Come and see.
After demolishing my place, I don't have where to stay. I hung around for 2 weeks. No money. I don't expect that day they will come and demolish that place with somebody. So now I hang around with my children, with 6 children. I hang around, I don't have a place to stay. Even if I have money to pack my things to play, I don't have. Me, I'm not a lazy woman. I'm not a criminal, I'm not a militant. I'm a struggling woman. I do business. I do petty trade, rice, beans, tomatoes, I sell. I go to and buy things and sell. I'm not a lazy woman. I'm an industrious woman. I do business. I'm a struggling woman. And now the government frustrates me. There's no way to. Even all my property was scattered, my things, my business was scattered. No way to start even the business. No way to manage. No way even to put my children in the school. That place is our home, where we brought up. Are we supposed to be refugees in our own lands?
We are saying that we are not wicked, but we are here to develop our community. Daddy, the God of heaven has given us the power to bring up the young ones that are perishing and hopeless. Hunger strike, Papa. Jesus, we will not suffer because of your wisdom. Let the men be in their area. We will not tolerate any form of criminality in this community. We are saying, please leave us alone, oh, let us stay in our place. So we have noise and violence. Daddy, grandma, your life. Tawuna basi si wachere, grandma.
So, we'll come back to this scene in a moment. This is a presentation in 2 parts, violence by design and other stories. First, violence by design. So, Port Harcourt seems a world away from this city, but actually there's a whole tangle of connections between the creeks of that city and the canals of Amsterdam, and we'll tease some of those out today, perhaps. Port Harcourt was founded in 1912 as a site of extraction for the British colonial administration, a site to extract coal from the interior. And the Bight of Benin, or the Bight of Biafra, has long been a site of extraction for dark cargo. First human beings, then palm oil, then coal, then crude oil. And it was actually an act of cartographic design that first inflicted the founding violence of this city. With lines on a map, this tangle of creeks was turned into a site of extraction that the master planners then inscribed in space. The material violence of extraction and the social violence of segregation. So if you compare here these very dense barracks of the native quarter, what's called the native quarter, to these, the leafy, green, rolling lawns of the European quarter, you can see the violence of segregation inscribed in the city. But the formal intentions of the original master planners, and in Nigeria, the colonial administration is still often called the colonial masters. The material violence of extraction and the social violence of segregation was overwhelmed by explosive oil-fueled growth. And this map, interestingly, comes from an archive in the Netherlands, and ostensibly it's a map drawn by the newly independent Nigerian Lands and Survey Department. But if you look at the very bottom, there's a note which says air and ground surveys by Shell BP Petroleum. So literally, the map of Port Harcourt was drawn by Shell. And this explosive growth, where between 91 and 2006, the population of the city almost quadrupled, went from around 400,000 to around 1.6 million. This informal growth has led to the old colonial city. You can see the grid in the middle being taken over by these very dense waterfront settlements all around the edge. And a quarter to half the population of the entire city live in them. And the governor declared them for demolition, all of them. But this is the core condition. This is where most people live. This is how most people live. 480,000 people, but no municipal services whatsoever. No sanitation, problems of insecurity and prejudicial policing, and of course, stark inequality. But importantly, these communities are incredibly resourceful. They're self-built, after all, and they have the capacity to address small-scale problems, here small-scale drainage and refuse problems, with small-scale solutions. But they're problems that can't be addressed at community level, that need a government to address them. But rather than engage with the actual city, the existing urban fabric, and with the priorities of the people that live in this fabric, and after all created this fabric, there's this fantastical approach. And there's a violent disconnect between these fantasy designs and what happens on ground. So I'll just show you a clip in a moment. The first clip was taken on a mobile phone by some government official at the launch of the Greater Port Harcourt Development Master Plan, and the second clip was not taken at the launch of the master plan.
The intrepid governor of River State has made a commitment to renew Port Harcourt. His vision for the Greater Port Harcourt of the 21st century is a modern, thriving, world-class city, a garden city, whose citizens enjoy an enviable quality of life, a sought-after tourist destination, an inspiration, and a monument to what can be achieved through determined, coordinated effort.
You want to develop the place. You say it's for the good of the people. And you start killing the people. This state now, you don't trust anybody. Anything can happen. So I think we do something swiftly to save their lives.
Then they start firing. They were shooting up, but I believe some evil-hearted ones will now point the gun down. They saw people falling. Then they start to run.
So, the governor's statement, nothing happened at all. The governor in Nigeria, the governor of the state, has incredible constitutional power, the power to make and unmake the city. And he's involved in a program of anti-design, of unmaking the physical and social and economic fabric of the city. I mean, in his own words, the discourse of urban design is militarized. And it's really important to understand the human impacts here, because 80% of population growth in Nigeria and across the developing world is urban growth. And 80% of urban growth is informal, the growth of slums. So this is the core urban condition, and therefore the core human condition. And if you look at the scale of the impact, if you see images like this, these are images that you would more ordinarily associate with natural disasters, with tsunamis or with earthquakes. But here, the disaster is political decision. This is a young student who's just pulling her textbooks out of the rubble. One is marketing in travel and tourism. So these scenes are not exceptional. They also perhaps look like scenes from a war zone, and in many ways this is a war on the poor. Not a war to create poverty as such, but a war whose violence immiserates masses. Families are disrupted, massive investments are wiped out, and whole communities are destroyed. But life goes on, and this is the context that we found ourselves working in. So, other stories. How do we respond? Well, first of all, with cinema, you might ask, why in the face of this overwhelming violence would we respond with images and image making? If you think back to the first clip I showed you, you see how people were directing me. As soon as people saw my camera, they immediately realized it was an instrument that they could use to frame their situation, to focus on what was important to them, and they directed me. So I cut the film together, I sent it to Amnesty International, they used it as part of a campaign, sent it back to me, and we took it round on a small screen around these communities, and people recognized themselves. People who had been treated as if they were invisible suddenly realized that they were visible and part of an international campaign. And then we decided to add a little bit of theater to the cinema, and we got a big inflatable cinema. And the community that you see on the screen is the community that the screen is in. So this situation in which people recognize themselves where they are, that scream of delight when a school child recognizes his classmates on the screen is really the animating impulse behind the project. It was a way of gathering, of focusing, of reframing, of animating and mobilizing people. And that desire to raise the visibility of these communities led to the People Live Here campaign. We wanted to make the communities visible in the city, on the streets, to make them visible to the rest of the city and to each other. We wanted to change the energy of the streets and raise some of these faces above the city. This billboard is in a space usually reserved for important things like soap, powder, and political campaigns. And we raised it above the city, and the governor pulled it down in 2 weeks because that simple message, people live here, is obscene to the official discourse. Here you see Prince, who I first saw through the camera with the camera that I first filmed him with. He's now the project's community media officer, and he was part of this campaign. So we had this strategy of visibility, and we thought, how can communities who have been brutalized, literally shot at, if you remember that clip from Bundu, how can they represent themselves in other ways? How can they represent themselves illegally as well? So we started a case in the ECOWAS court, an international court, and these are some of the people who were shot at the protest the moment the verdict came through. So after a 5-year struggle, we won. And this success led us to the Human City Project. We wanted to more systematically and more deliberately aim towards systemic change. We wanted to let people in and to remain rooted in the community, but to have an impact at city level and regional level. We wanted to move from opposition to proposition, from saying no to illegal demolitions, which is urgent and important, to saying yes to participatory development, to having a plan, something on the table. And at the heart of this, we have the media center. People all said that they lacked a voice. What they wanted was a voice. So we decided literally to build a platform for community voice, a community radio station and cinema and media center. And that was going to be the focus of a small series of projects that communities could run with a little bit of technical and strategic support. And that then would be the focus for a participatory mapping project, because these are communities that only appear when they're made to spectacularly disappear through demolition. They're not even on the map to be wiped off the map, and we wanted to give people the tools to literally put themselves on the map. The mapping data is going to be the foundation for the People's Plan, because people are conspicuously absent from the master plan, and all that supported by international campaigning. So that's the structure of the Human City Project. We wanted to start small so we could make mistakes and those mistakes not be catastrophic. So we started building what we call the media shed. We wanted to bring different people together across difference and allow people to do things differently. Young women doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And create a shed where we could demonstrate to people the possibilities of sustainable design. The place is run by solar, and this means that it's literally a light at night. It's a beacon, and people come there and charge their phones when there's no power anywhere else. It's a place where people gather. It's a place where people play. It's really changed the nature of the space around it. It has an exhibition space in it, and at the heart of it, a radio training studio. And this then is the launch platform for Chikoko Radio, community radio station. We were at pains to make sure that the whole process was rooted deeply in the community. So we gathered community ambassadors from all across the city. We had open days. There's Anna, who's with us today. She runs our audio programs. And then we sent these community ambassadors back out to their communities, and they sent in participants, and they've gone through a 2-year training now. There'll be the technicians, the engineers, the journalists, the presenters, the studio managers, and they have a real hands-on understanding. This is our Smart Hands program. We get them to think literally in the box, which is key to sustainability. And as well as thinking in the box, we have them out in the street gathering the sounds and voices of their communities. Just play you a little jingle.
It's a floating station over the waters. Check a Queen sound. Now the water's siren.
So there's lots more, but no time for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Michael Uwemedimo, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. Thank you for making us aware about also the dangerous side of design. I wonder, when you look at the future, what do you see? What are your expectations and maybe your dreams and hopes for the future?
Well, we operate on the principle of as if certain things are possible, because otherwise, why bother? So we operate as if it's possible to effect large-scale mobilizations of excluded communities so that they insist on inhabiting spaces of democratic decision-making, as if. What's most likely is increasingly securitized and stark inequality until we reach a point where it's materially unsustainable, and no matter how high you build your walls, the walls are overwhelmed. So we hope that our intervention can make the as-if more likely.
Yes.
And if we all insist on that, then it becomes even more likely. But actually, if we take a sober and objective look, we're likely to fail. But we try and fail usefully, as we say, fail forward.
And what about the international community? Because I think this is also very important. I don't think a lot of people were aware that this was happening in Nigeria. I'm ashamed that I didn't know.
Well,
actually.
I mean, it's key because there are material connections between, as I said, between the creeks of Port Harcourt and here. This is where 12% of Shell's revenue comes from. And 2 million people were displaced in Nigeria in a single decade. So we're not talking about a peripheral condition. We're talking about something on the scale of natural disaster or war. And as I say, this is the core urban condition. So it's really important that we understand that this is part of a global configuration. Yes. As I said, for 500 years, the Niger Delta has been part of a globalized political economy that has been one of extreme violence. So we need to make decisions here to change it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Michael Uwemedimo, thank you so much.